prepare like Esther, fight like Deborah. That's the challenge for women in America from TheCall founder Lou Engle, because he says our country needs women now more than ever.
You don't have to settle for a generation in our nation being destroyed by deception.
It's time for the woman to step out of the shadows of insecurity and fears and shame.
Be who God created you to be and set your world on fire.
It's time for the women preachers to arise. It's time for the women voices to arise. It's time for the real thing. It's time for the outpouring of Acts chapter 2.
It's why I believe in this call to women to rise up as mothers of a nation, mothers in your family.
And if you'll come and if you'll cry together, God is going to birth it.
I am Deborah.
I am Deborah.
I am Esther.
I am Esther.
I am Deborah.
I am Esther.
For my sons and daughters. For my sons and daughters.
Sons and daughters.
I will rise up. I will rise up.
I will rise up.
I will rise up.
For my sons and daughters.
Beginning today and on October 9th,
we will rise up.
Lou Engle from TheCall is here with us now. Lou, welcome back to the 700 Club. Good to see you, my
Wendy,
friend.
17 years ago, you stood with us in D.C. for the first call. So good to be with you.
It's so great. I'll never forget it. Never forget it. Well, in January of this year, we saw thousands of women on the mall in Washington, D.C., mainly in protest of the election and President Trump. You met a lot of Christian women who said to you, "That's not my march." And now you're doing something about it. What are you doing?
Well, we're gathering really for the 6th, 7th, and 8th, 50 state tents. It's called Awaken the Dawn. 50 states are coming for 3 days of day and night worship. It's called Awaken the Dawn. And then on the 9th, Columbus Day, we are calling the women of America, young and old, to gather together to seek God and to pray, daring to believe it's going to shift history in America.
Why is this the hour for women, Lou?
Well, it's interesting. Psalm 68 is very interesting. We've been hearing it all over the place. One young lady was reading Psalm 68:11. It says, "And the Lord gives the command, great is the number of the women who herald the good news." Wow. She went into 21 days fasting, praying God would birth a Psalm 68 women's movement. This is what that is. We feel it is the hour for women to arise with a godly foundation, not looking to that march that took place after the elections, a godly foundation to pray. It really started with a woman, 2010, was praying on a rock, Mary Washington's Rock in Virginia, where Mary Washington prayed for her son during the war. George Washington, every day praying for the survival of the nation. I prophesied over her, hundreds of thousands of women will be a part of this movement. God exploded 3 years ago a revelation that the women would go, it'd be a last stand against unrighteousness, and they would birth a new Jesus movement. 3 years later, that vision is coming to pass.
Speaking of the Jesus movement, it's been said by many people that that was birthed because of the mothers that were praying. Is that right?
Dear friend of mine, Francis Frangipane, studied revivals. He said, I found a prayer movement that preceded every revival except one, the Jesus movement in the 60s and the 70s. Right. He said, Lord, was there a prayer movement? And the Lord answered, yes, I answered the cries of 1 million mothers. Wow. They were losing their kids in the 60s and the 70s. Yeah. It was the cultural revolution. They began to cry to God, and God gave us thousands. We haven't seen a revival like that since the 60s and 70s. We have to have it again because we're losing our generation.
And you say that women, you need to prepare like Esther and fight like Deborah. What does that mean?
Well, actually, we've only got 2 months. Esther prepared for a year. We need to mobilize, move women to build an altar, to cry out to God. And also, I believe that God is raising up women for voices in Reformation and great evangelists. I went to Estes Park for 5 days days in Colorado to pray and had a dream of thousands of women coming to study the book of Esther. And I knew there's coming an Esther movement, and I was to be a part of heralding that. With that vision, we're calling women, young and old, by the thousands, to come together October 9th and cry out to God, shift this nation, raise up voices, and dare to believe for a new Jesus movement. We're seizing the day, only have 2 months to prepare.
Well, hey, with God, all things are possible.
Yes.
And if anybody can do it, Lou Engle can. Well, you know, speaking of Esther, I mean, God used her, she was obviously a woman, to save an entire race of people. And in this case, only a woman could do that. You are saying that in this hour that we're in, this spiritual hour, that God is saying to you and many others, this is the hour for women. Only women can turn the tide of what's happening right now.
When I had this dream, the Lord showed me in the dream there are certain powers of darkness that can only be broken by women, and I believe abortion's one of them. See, we're going there. We want to raise up 1 million petitions to go to the Supreme Court. It's time for Esther not just to pray, she has to petition the king.
Yeah.
To end the death decree. We're in a moment, if the church responds, we could see things shift in this nation. And I actually believe that, we called a 3-day Esther fast because the witches, you heard this, the witches were calling a worldwide cursing of the president and all those allied. I realized at that moment, you can't deal with this on a political realm. You must deal with it in a spiritual realm. I called a 3-day Esther fast. You knew about that. And in 10 days, the largest mobilization I've ever seen, 83 countries, 7 continents, they were fasting in the Antarctic. Women were rising up. It's the hour for a great mobilization of women, Esther's and Deborah's.
You know, it's interesting. It seems like oftentimes when God is doing something in the spirit realm, it manifests in the natural realm. For example, Wonder Woman came out this summer, the first female superhero film in over a decade, I think. And the actress was Israeli. It was directed by a woman. Very unusual to have a female director of an action film. And one of the things that was interesting in the film is that Wonder Woman, she goes into no man's land. And she is the only one who can turn the tide of the war. And I'm thinking, is Lou getting this? Is Lou hearing it? Does Lou know about this? I mean, what are the spiritual... Do you see the spiritual parallel?
Oh, absolutely. The movie is amazing. She doesn't have a bit of anger, bitterness as a woman. She's feeling compassion for all the people. And she says, you can't deal with the violence on the ground unless you deal with the principality and power. You go watch the movie. In fact, my dream was that only women can break certain kinds of principalities and powers. I think sometimes Hollywood prophesies better than the church does.
Okay, Lou, we've got 1 minute left. This is happening in 2 months. October 9th is a Monday, Columbus Day. Why is that significant?
Well, it's significant in the sense that we're holding 3 days of tent meetings on, it's so interesting, 3 days on the Feast of Tabernacles. We didn't plan it that. When the tents come, we believe it's harvest time. And secondly, it's the 20th anniversary of Promise Keepers.
And how can women get involved? You want to see 500,000 women on the mall.
We'll see.
How can women get their women's groups, their churches? How can they get involved?
Register. Go to TheCall.com and register now. And then just mobilize everywhere, young and old. Bring your daughters, bring your sons. We're going to cry out for the next generation. And if men want to join their wives, they can. Okay. We believe that God is saying, I want men and women to love one another, not to divide from one another. We're in a great hour.
Okay, that's good to know. Men are welcome, and it's going to be...
But it's a women's gift.
It's
October 9th, my birthday.
Okay, awesome. Well, you can find out how to register for Awaken the Dawn and Rise Up by going to cbn.com. Go right now and register.